1924. The entire nation, as well as the crowds in Boston Harbor, waited to cheer the first round-the-world flyers. The U.S. Air Service, struggling with a few men, a handful of planes, and very little money, hoped these spectacular achievements would help win public support. Even though it took 6 months for the sturdy biplanes to circle the Earth, the Air Service was making a victim of space. Traversing more than 27,000 miles, they had flown through every weather on Earth. The conquering heroes, led by Lieutenant Lowell Smith, succeeded where all others had failed and at long last returned home. These 6, Harding, Nelson, L.P. Arnold, Wade, Ogden, and Smith, together had reduced the size of the Earth under the leadership of Mitchell and General Patrick, new Chief of the Air Service.
At the same time, we developed the Barling bomber. For crew, we had pilots Lieutenants Harris and Muir Fairchild, the designer Barling and engineer Culver. They climbed through the hatch of the monster, which had been shipped to Wright Field in sections. These men were taking a big step toward realizing Billy Mitchell's strategic bombing theories. From his open cockpit, the commander surveyed the man-of-war and ordered his crew chief to start the 6 Liberty engines. 4 of these were tractors, while 2 worked as pushers. With everything checked, the pilot gave the signal to taxi toward the takeoff point on the grassy runway. The Barling had 3 wings, which spanned 120 feet, and it stood 27 feet high, dwarfing all Air Service planes of the time. Meet the Super Dreadnought, biggest attempt at a long-range load-carrying heavy bomber. In fact, this was the largest ever built in the United States up to then. During construction, it raised many eyebrows because the plane cost somewhere near $500,000. A very high cost for a new airplane idea when the total Air Service budget was so small. The experimental triplane clumsily started its takeoff for the first time in 1923. 32,000 pounds traveling along at the incredible speed of 61 miles an hour. When it couldn't climb over the Appalachian Mountains, the Barling was grounded and was used to solve engineering problems. It certainly influenced development of the B-17.
The next year, President Coolidge looked for the Pan American Goodwill Flyers to land at Bowling Field, Washington. After they had flown 22,000 miles and had visited 25 sister republics, Major Herbert Dargue and his crew were welcomed back to the U.S. The President awarded each flyer a Distinguished Service Cross certificate in a ceremony attended by the Cabinet. The new Air Corps chief congratulated the flyers, including future Air Force generals, Lieutenant Ennis Whitehead and Captain Ira Aker. Thus, the Air Corps had demonstrated its diplomatic value to the nation.
Also in 1926, Frederick Patterson, head of a group of Ohio businessmen, broke ground for Wright Field. 2 years later, Orville Wright raised the flag for our dedication ceremony in the distinguished company of many notables and aviation names. Together, they hallowed the ground for the Air Corps Materiel Division, which was going to build the greatest flying field in the world, near Dayton, home of aviation. America couldn't have had better representation than Orville Wright, Secretary of War Davis, Judge Kennesaw Landis, Assistant Secretary Truby Davison, Air Corps Chief General Patrick, and many others. From the steps of the new headquarters, they witnessed the gun salute. Squadrons of the latest planes passed in review and hailed Wright Field.
Another distinguished Army flight was the first non-stop attempt from California to Hawaii. Ground crews carefully prepared the huge tri-motor Air Corps monoplane called the Bird of Paradise. She was going to fly an untried course mapped out by Lieutenants Maitland and Hagenberger. Oakland airport crowds applauded the two Army flyers as they gunned their engines and started off down the long runway. Hundreds of gallons of gas made a heavy and dangerous load. Finally, the Bird of Paradise lifted itself off the earth and headed for 2,400 miles of nothing but ocean. Navigation was the chief problem. Using instruments he had designed and developed himself, Hagenberger guided Maitland straight to their goal, an island in the vast Pacific. Less than 26 hours later, the people of Hawaii hurried to get a look at the first airplane flown from the States. Maitland and Hagenberger had made it. Seems that almost everyone in Honolulu came out to say aloha to the two tired but happy men who had spanned the Pacific. This was later regarded as the most perfectly organized and completely planned flight ever attempted. Hagenberger and Maitland triumphantly returned to the States by boat.
In the 20s, the Army watched Americans stunt flying the oceans. Charles Lindbergh, Will Rogers and Wiley Post, Amelia Earhart, and many others. The Air Corps learned from successes as well as failures, like this overloaded civilian takeoff. Luckily, Ruth Elder and a pilot were only slightly injured.